So the theme for this week is perfection is self-transcendence. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. We begin this week with a passage from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them who despitefully use you and persecute you. If you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even pagans do so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father, which is in heaven, is perfect. This teaching is a continuation of last week's lesson. To love all equally is possible only by seeing God everywhere, in others as well as in oneself. See whatever comes to you unasked for as a manifestation of His will. Be grateful for the pains you experience, for they are healing strokes of His love. Sometimes healing is effected only by strong measures, but His love for you is manifested in the very attempt to heal. Strive always to be impersonal, as though whatever happens to you were happening to someone else. Persecution gives us the supreme opportunity to deny the thought, this is happening to me, and to affirm our inner freedom from the thought of ego. Don't allow the negative perceptions of others to become your own self-definition. Seek God. This is the true goal of life, though how difficult to cling to it in the midst of hatred, spite, and persecution. The Bhagavad Gita tells us in the 7th chapter, out of thousands, one strives for spiritual attainment, and out of many blessed truth seekers who strive assiduously to reach me, one perhaps perceives me as I am. O truth seeker, be one among all those thousands who seeks the supreme goal. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Well, this is both a very interesting topic this week and one that is difficult for most people to be able to put into practice. That is to return love to those people who are apparently misusing you or doing something negative to you. You see, the whole of the spiritual path is meant to help us overcome our sense of separateness from other people. And so that's relatively easy to do when things are going well and everybody is nice and kind to us and there aren't any big problems. But when something happens that's either greatly positive or greatly negative, it's really our reactive process that is creating the whole problem. Because when something very positive happens to us, our reaction is strong, and that reactive process draws us more into ego, into our sense of separateness. And so when something positive happens, a raise at work, advancement at work, the tendency is to say, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? I deserve that. I'm a great employee. Or to have that sense of I really deserve that. And all that does, even if it's true, and it probably is true, because karmically we wouldn't get that advancement or we wouldn't get that raise unless we did deserve it. But accepting that we deserve it, emphasizing the I-ness of it, is what causes the problem. And so when something positive happens, it's very hard then to detach ourselves and to remain free from the reactive process. The reactive process, to a large extent, is what keeps the ego functioning. Because when that reactive process dies down, life begins to seem uninteresting. Master said that we always alternate. We alternate between positive reactions, negative reactions, and then he said in between those two is boredom. And so if things aren't interesting enough, we have the tendency to stir up a little bit of trouble just to make things more interesting. Isn't that right? And so you'll find people who are kind of bored, they're more likely to get into an argument with each other, or they're liable to do something to get rid of that placid boredom state. Now, there's another placid state, which is pure sattvic, which is what the masters are. They don't have an active reactive process, and so they're calm like the ocean, but the ocean, they're not calm like the ocean surface, which is what emotions are. They're calm like the depths of the ocean. And so they remain in that calm state always. But so we have a reactive process toward good things, but we have a, generally speaking, even a stronger reactive process toward negative things, especially when those negative things come to us in the form of someone persecuting us or acting negatively toward us. Almost everyone has the reaction of pushing back against negative circumstances. If someone comes up to you and says at work, you're a terrible employee, you didn't do that job, you never seem to complete the jobs very well, our immediate reaction is to begin to defend ourselves and to begin to push back against that person. In couples, if one couple says something negative, a little attacking, how many people are able to return love in that circumstance? Almost everybody reacts by arguing back. And so that reactive process just continues. What this subject is saying today is that if we only react positively when circumstances are positive, what good is that? Everybody's able to do that. Are we able, the real test is, are we able to return love, or are we able to act positively in the face of negative energy coming toward us? Because the reactive process almost always wants us to fight back. So what's the way out of this conundrum? It's not to say to a person who falsely accuses us, oh, you must be right. Master, in fact, maybe you've heard this story, but this man came and had a terrible reputation. Nobody could get along with him. And that was because he always criticized and he was always attacking people. And so he came to Master and he started criticizing Master. And every time he said something, Master very calmly said, you may be right. And so again he would attack. Master would say, you may be right. He didn't say you're wrong because he didn't want to battle against him, but he didn't say you're right. because he didn't want to agree with a false accusation. All he said was, "You may be right." And after some time, not finding anybody to fight with, this man said, "I give up. You're the only one who's ever defeated me in this way." Because Master was in control of his reactive process. But how many of us, if somebody came, and a person who has a terrible reputation as somebody who constantly is criticizing and attacking, if he comes and attacks us, how many of us can control our reactive process, really control it? I'm not talking here about just suppressing our anger or suppressing the response, but how many of us can really control that reactive process? If we can, see, everybody has a magnetism. Everything in this universe works off magnetism. And so if somebody comes to us with negativity, they're like a negative magnetism. And the law of magnetism is that like attracts like. And so if we have the potential for negativity of that type within us, then we are attracted to that negativity and will respond. And will respond with the same kind of energy. And very, very few people are strong enough. Remember, Swami said the fourth kind of courage is divine courage. And divine courage is able to create its own reality. And so in the midst of an attack, one kind of courage fights back, says, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to fight back with that." And we may be able, even with that kind of courage, to win the battle, but we're attacking negativity with negativity of our own, because the magnetic impulse is to attack, to have the same kind of magnetism. But what Swami said, the higher kind of courage is to create our own reality. And so when a person comes and has negative energy, if we're strong enough, we can create our own reality, not be drawn into that negativity, but create a reality really of healing, that we can heal that person. We had a friend who she was very, very powerful woman, and she had just a lot of energy and a lot of magnetism, but she also had a fiery temper. And so one time she was an artist. She taught at the University of Berkeley. She taught art there and was quite a famous artist in the San Francisco Bay Area. And one time she was in her studio painting, and she had a question about, I don't even know what it was, but she had a friend who worked at an office, so she called him up and asked him this question. And when she got him on the line, the man said, "Why are you calling me at work? Don't you know I'm busy? I have a job too to do. You can't just call me at work anytime you want to, and I don't want to talk to you now." And he slammed the phone down. Well, this woman with the fiery temper, she wasn't going to take that from anybody. So she picked up the phone and dialed him back again, and the line was busy. And then she immediately dialed him back again. Line was busy. Then a minute later she dialed him back again. The line was busy. And then she got back to work, and so she was in the midst of doing a painting, and so many hours passed because she was focused and concentrated on the painting. And many hours passed, and in that time her reactive process had been able to cool down. And so her rational mind returned, and she said, "He doesn't usually act that way. I wonder if something's wrong with him, if he's ill or if something's happened in his life. So she was beginning, instead of reacting, to create a different reality, that of a healer. And so she called him back, and this time she got him. But instead of shouting at him, which had been her intention, she said, "This isn't like you to react in this way. Are you okay? Did something happen?" And he started weeping. He said, "I've had just a terrible week. It's been terrible at work. I've been fighting with my wife. It's just been such a difficult time for me." And they talked for quite some time, and she was able to help him. But see how she created a whole different reality, but it took time. Swami said that when an event happens that is unpleasant, it's like a wave of energy. And generally speaking, what we do is we wait until that wave kind of begins to decrease until it comes down to the energy level that we're able to handle. But he said if instead, when that wave of energy increases, if we can raise our energy, we'll get above it and see it from a higher perspective, and then we're in control of the situation, really control of our own reactive process. So, in fact, the higher way is to see that God is sending every event into your life, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you can get to the point where even in the heat of potential reactions, your instinctive reaction is to say, "Thank you, God," then that will greatly control the ups and downs in your life. Now, Kriya and our spiritual path is specifically designed for us to take control of this reactive process. The reactive process happens in the spine, actually in the deep Sushumna, and it's centered in the heart, in the Anahata chakra. And so from that center, when something happens, either the energy goes up and there's a positive reaction, or it goes down and there's a negative reaction. But Kriya teaches us to take control of that energy and under our own will and control to bring it up and down. And so the practice of Kriya does two things. One, it teaches us to control our energy so that we're able to respond all the time in a positive way. And secondly, it cleans out our karma so that we don't have the tendency, the karmic tendency, the compulsion to react in a negative way. And finally, it does one more thing, which is at the end of Kriya, when we concentrate at the spiritual eye and go deeply into the concentration of the stillness there, either by going into the light or listening to Om or feeling joy, whatever the practice is that we do after Kriya, we actually contact God and our own godly nature inside. And if we can contact that during times of difficulty, then difficulty can't harm us. One time, one of Master's first disciple in America, Dr. Lewis, was out sailing, and a big storm came up, and a big squall, and he was in a little sailboat, and so he was in real danger. And he remembered Master saying that if you can stay in the Om, nothing can touch you. And so he immediately started in his ear listening to the sound of Om. And at that time, Master was in Los Angeles. This was in Boston where Dr. Lewis was sailing. Master was in Boston, and he picked up on that.
Master was in Los Angeles.
Was in Los Angeles. And he picked up on that because Om is universal. And so Dr. Lewis was connecting with the universal instead of the individual at that moment. And so Master in Los Angeles started walking up and down in quite a, I would say agitated is what it would look like to a typical person, but energetic for Master. And he said to the person in the room, he said, "Doctor's in trouble, serious trouble, I tell you, serious trouble." And he put out prayer energy, and then the storm abated enough so Dr. Lewis was able to get back safely. And when he returned to home, soon after he came in the door, the telephone rang, and it was Master calling from Los Angeles, and he said, "Came close to getting wet, didn't you, Master? Didn't you, Doctor?" And Doctor laughed and of course thanked him for his protection. But see how Doctor used the teachings to rise above fear, rise above concern, rise above negativity, rise above the tendency to say, "Oh, why are you doing this to me, God?" But contacted the universal within him, and in doing that, rose above the tendency to be drawn magnetically into the problem of this world, because this world is always built on duality. If we can rise above duality, this world can't touch us. And so continue our practice of Kriya, continue going deeper, but God will send you tests and send you difficulties until you learn to rise above those difficulties and to take everything that comes to you as a gift from the divine.
So I'll also share just a few words, and then we'll have time for questions from all of you. First of all, it's just been so lovely watching all of you. It's like we're really there in the center. And, you know, when we come back in the fall, Dharmarajan and Dharmini, I wouldn't say they promised us, but they're strongly indicating that the new center will be ready. And we hope we can all be together there and have a dedication. That would be lovely. So in this passage that we've read, first from the Bible, then the Bhagavad Gita, Christ is telling ways to behave, to love people that maybe are outside your natural affection, to accept any adversity with equanimity. But, you know, if people only take the teachings from the outside, you can check off all the checklists. Oh, I was nice to a mean person today. Oh, I didn't get angry. And you can make a long checklist of all these things that you've done. But does that bring you closer to God? Well, probably a little bit, but not in a major way. But I think the real important part of this passage from the Bible is Christ said, "Be therefore perfect." Well, by not getting angry, by being good to people that aren't very lovable, let's say, does that make us perfect? No, it doesn't it makes us better people perhaps, but it doesn't make us perfect. What is perfection? Perfection is awakening to God's presence within us. And so this is really what Christ is saying. By inner work, by sadhana, by attunement with God, by calling on His inward presence, that transforms our consciousness. And when we live in the reality of God, then we can do nothing that's out of attunement with God's will. And then no matter what happens, our behavior, our thoughts, our reactions are all perfect because they're only a reflection of God. And so rather than trying to, the spiritual path, approach it piecemeal, okay, I'll do this, I'll be nice to this person, and I won't get angry, and all these things, but to start at the core of where we need to be, And that's to realize God's presence within us. And when we do that, then everything flows beautifully. Whatever happens, all we can respond to is love. We were talking today, we had a Skype with a woman who's having some problems with someone else. She wanted our advice and so forth. And it's a complex situation. We really didn't know any specific things we could tell her that might help. But we said, we know one thing. The only way this situation will be resolved is through love. And if you can remain centered in love, then you will find the answer of how to go forward. And so it is if we want to reflect God's perfection, we have to feel His presence within us. We have to really work at that, because it's as though we're, Master tells the story of the lion that as a little cub was lost and strayed and wandered into a flock of sheep, and he just thought he was a sheep, and so he learned how to, instead of roaring, he would baa like the sheep, and he would eat the grass, and he wouldn't hurt other things. And then one day another lion saw him, and he said, "What are you doing? You're not a sheep, you're a lion." And he said, "Bah, what do you mean? This is who I am." And the other lion took him and held his face in front of a pool of water, a small pond, and he looked and he saw he didn't look like the other ones. He didn't look like a sheep. He was a lion. And this is a metaphor for we associate with people in their egos. And so we think we're an ego. We forget that we're a divine incarnation. And it takes a great one, like the guru, like Master, to come and say, "What are you doing? You think you're a little sheep, a little ego? You're so much more than that. You're a child of God. Awaken to that potential." And then when we do that, we cast off that false identity of being this little diminished self. And it's not that it's with ego that we say we're a part of God, but there's just no sense of self. We're just of the little self. There's only a sense of God's presence. And that's what it means to be perfect, to awaken to who we really are. And then the quote from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says to Arjuna, "Out of 1,000 who seek me, one perhaps finds me. And out of 1,000, one seeks me, and out of 1,000 who seeks me, one perhaps finds me." Or in this translation, "who sees me as I really am." I think Master, what Master had to say about that. He said, our percentages are better than that. So we don't have to think that out of 1,000 Kriya bonds, only one will find God. Because we're going at it directly. If you're just going at trying to find God by outward rituals, by outward behavior, it will take a very long time. But if we can really understand that the path that Master has given us is, as he said, the jet airplane path to God. All of us can find Him. Not just one out of 1,000 Kriya bonds. I think all Kriya bonds, if they practice deeply and sincerely and continuously, then we will find God. And then that sense of perfection comes. And what is that? Again, that perfection, it's looking and realizing that all of our life, all of our past lives, whatever the future may hold, it all was blessed in the sight of God. There's nothing that exists outside of the sight of God. And when we understand that, then we realize that it's always been perfect and we are a part of that perfection. And that's when we know the joy of God's presence within us. So this is a wonderful, wonderful quotations, and how wonderful that our Guru's mission was to compare the teachings of East and West, to bring them together and to help us to be citizens of a new world where there aren't divisions, but only recognition there is one God, and we all are a part of that. So now we want to hear from you. Well, we've only seen your smiles and heard your chanting and your laughter, so now if you have any questions, we'll try our best to answer them if we can. Okay, Prasana.
How to get out of restlessness quickly. So usually when I'm restless, I have to go to a place where I know I can be calm and calm down myself slowly, and that restless energy goes away. But usually I am not able to get out of the place where I am at, and I remain restless for a while till I get out of that situation or place and to somewhere else where I can be calm again and then get back in. So how to get out of restlessness where we are at and just continue on with calmness.
That's a very common problem almost everyone has, and it's not easy to be able to do that in the midst. See, it's a variation on Master said that environment is stronger than willpower. And so the environment that you're in at that time, individual willpower, it's hard for you to overcome the restlessness in that environment. But gradually you'll be able to get stronger in that. A few things that can help. One is try even for just a little bit, maybe even less than a minute, but each hour practice a little bit of Hong Sa. That will bring you back into yourself. You can even just kind of close your eyes as if you're resting your eyes just for a minute and practice Hong Sa. If some specific thing happens that causes you to be restless, take a few deep breaths at that time, because that and try to make those breaths regular. You know, inhale to 8, count of 8, hold 8, exhale 8. That too will bring that reactive process more under your control and bring the energy in the spine more under your control. But you won't easily be able to control it if you just remain connected to the environment, because that restless environment will be stronger than your individual willpower. So do just a little bit of the practices, and it kind of breaks the momentum and breaks the bubble, bursts the bubble of it.
And also, you know, continued practice of meditation begins to change the patterns of thought and consciousness. And so even though the world may be pulling you in a very restless direction, the more we practice meditation, the more the mind just naturally becomes calm. And you know, you hear about scientific research that's done on the brains of long-term meditators, where they hook them up with, you know, little wires and so forth, and just very calm brain waves. And so we have to retrain ourselves, because just as Master says, when the consciousness enters the physical body, it enters into at the medulla, and then it goes out into the chakra, down into the chakras and out into the world, the physical world, the material world. And the whole process of sadhana is to reverse that and to bring that energy within and up. So training helps, practice helps, regularity helps. And when you feel, as Jyotish was saying, when you feel overcome by restlessness at any particular moment, then go within. Do a little bit of, as he was saying, those practices. But remember that it's the state of not being of calmness. The more we enjoy that state in meditation, and this is another thing that people often forget, even with the basic technique of Hong Sa. Remember that Swamiji has instructed us, enjoy the pauses between the breath. People often forget that. You're concentrated on the inhalation, exhalation. But really the more important thing is to enjoy the pauses after the exhalation, before the next inhalation. And the more we can begin enjoying that, the more the restlessness becomes something, it's sort of like eating food that we don't like. You know, you don't want to be restless. You want to stay in that state of calm centeredness. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Yogini?
Jyotish, when we're looking for a spiritual guru, what qualities should we be looking for?
When looking for a guru, what qualities should we be looking for?
Well, Krishna lists them in the Bhagavad Gita. So you want someone who is always calm, doesn't react, always positive, who has no attachment either to money or fame or any of that, who's wise. But Swami gave very good advice. He said it's difficult to know what the real quality of the guru is, especially when you see that guru only for a brief time. He said, look rather at the disciples and see what the quality of the disciples are and whether you would like to be like one of those disciples. Because, you know, I've seen many different spiritual paths, and I've seen some disciples who are always maneuvering kind of jealously to be closer to the guru. And if you want to be like that, that shows that there's something off in the guru himself, because otherwise he would train his disciples differently from that. So look at the disciples and see if they attract you and you would like to become like that. Other than that, let your heart be your guide, because your heart will naturally resonate with the teaching and the path and the guru that's right for you.
We were having lunch recently with a man who lives at Ananda Village, and he's just come here in the last few years, but he was a disciple of Master for many years. And he said when he had read Autobiography of a Yogi, and he was born hard of hearing, so he's worn hearing aids all his life. And so he read Autobiography of a Yogi, and then he was living by one of the Self-Realization Fellowship churches in California, and he's decided, well, I'll go and see what their teachings are like. And so he went, but he said, never in my life has this happened, but I forgot to put in my hearing aids. So I went in, and I couldn't hear a word that was being said, but I was so taken by Master's picture. That's all I could relate to, was the love pouring out of that picture. And he said, I knew this was for me. And so that's I like that story a lot. And now he lives at Ananda because he felt that this was where he felt Master's presence more strongly. But it's not of the mind. It isn't done analytically. And in fact, we don't choose the guru. The guru chooses us. And he makes us realize that we belong to him, whoever or her, whoever it may be.
Vineet?
When helping someone or when someone shares a problem with us, how do we help them by feeling from where they come from, like at their own level, understanding them, because we might not be able to relate them to the way they are. how they perceive the problem to be, or what they perceive it to be. So how do we deal that?
Well, there are a few things that are helpful. One is to listen very sensitively to what they're saying. And Swami taught us to listen behind the words, because often the words are not what they're really asking. Behind that will be another problem or a deeper question. And sometimes people would get frustrated with Swami because he wouldn't answer the question that they were asking, but he was answering the question their soul was asking. And so listen for what the soul, and then always respond kindly, and try to give some helpful advice that you think they can actually practice. You know, if they're just starting on the spiritual path, then tell them something like, you know, it would be really helpful if you would just, for 5 minutes a day, meditate. Something like that, you know. Don't give them just from your own standpoint. Try to feel what the right step for that person is at this point in their life, and help them to take their next step.
And, you know, over the years, Jyotish and I have talked to many people who have asked us for advice, and it's not easy to know what the right thing is to say, how you can really help the person. But over time, I've really come to appreciate the fact that if you can just listen with your whole heart and your whole mind, that in itself is a gift, even if you don't know exactly what to say. But by giving that person your sincere attention and your sincere desire to help them, very often it has happened a great deal of the time. All of a sudden, as the conversation progresses, they'll say, you know, I really understand what I need to do now. And then they'll say it, and you'll realize that's the right thing. And so it's almost as though we create an aura of light by opening our heart to God's compassion, to God's wisdom, and then God speaks from within them. And that's the best kind of advice, when they themselves can figure it out. So our job is simply to be there, to be a channel for God's compassion and love, and then pray that they be guided in the right way.
Puri, did you have a question? Barney?
Creating our own reality in front of negativity doesn't mean that we should be non-reactive, and if we are so, that does not make a doormat out of us.
Somebody repeat it, because
she said if we create our own reality in the face of a negative reality, should we be non-reactive? And if we are non-reactive, does it not make a doormat out of us?
Okay, well, that's the fear that many people have, that if we don't react negatively to negative energy, that people will walk all over us. Master didn't react negatively to negative energy, but nobody walked over him. Nor did Swami. Almost never did he react to negativity with negativity. But nobody walked over Swami either. And I might say the same is true for Devi and me. Nobody's going to walk over us. But we don't want to react negatively to people just to show that we have strength. If you can maintain your own inner strength, then people will feel that, and they will understand that they can't get away with things, even though you don't express it outwardly. You know, if somebody shouts at you and you shout back, that isn't nearly as effective as if someone shouts at you and you remain very calm and then just talk in a soft voice back. They will feel more strength in you being able to control yourself than they will in if they can get your goat. And so don't have a goat that they can get.
But, you know, if you're in an environment where it's, you know, everyone is negative and trying to put everyone else down, you know, I've seen, you know, part of our experience at Ananda, we've dealt with so many groups of people and different situations and meetings really all over the world, and we've had our own share of having to deal with negativity and disharmonious groups. But if you can always surround yourself, a friend of mine gave me a good image. She said, if people are coming at you with negativity, feel like you're sitting in your car and you just roll up the window and so it can't get in. And just try to, I mean, God has put you in that situation for a reason. And that reason is to realize that light really is more powerful than darkness. Darkness is not cohesive. It doesn't hold together. It dissipates over time. But the light of our own soul, it triumphs over that darkness. And you know, we've been in situations where people have been very aggressively negative towards Ananda, towards us, towards Swamiji. And if we just, you know, we just called on God, you have to support us in this. You have to help us in this. We will not, I remember once some people were attacking Swamiji verbally, and he said, and it was very hard in attacking Ananda, and Swami said to us, what is our choice? To be like them? We don't want to be like them. So we will just continue to be cheerful and positive and not let it get to us. So it can be done.
But also strong, never be a doormat.
Yeah. Okay, one more question, and then I think we'll close. It's getting to be 11 o'clock at night here.
Not a question, but a thought. Okay, so, just a thought, it's not a question. So joyful, not only joyful, but also it is so healing to just even see you here. So.
We feel the same way.
Yeah.
So the divine courage that you had told me, I think that is the basic for us today to take one with one confidence.
This is wonderful for us. It's a little like electronic bilocation.